Does anyone have the score of the Ohio State-Michigan game?
You're listening to a Holyfield podcast.
This episode of Creme Brulee is sponsored by The Vintage Wave, an online boutique sports apparel store with throwbacks and unique one-of-a-kind vintage goods. From new Mitchell & Ness looks to classic Nike and Adidas looks, The Vintage Wave has everything a sports or fashion fan could need. Visit them online at thevintagewave.com. All right, listeners, welcome back to another episode of the number one podcast in your headphones, Creme Brulee. I am your host, Premal of Holyfield, back with another edition, post-rivalry week, post-happy rivalry week. Without further ado, we kick things off, yeah, firm or nah? Some headlines from the week in sports, and you know how I usually kick it off. It's a recap of Week 12 in the NFL. Couple things to note. The Jacksonville Jaguars fired their offensive coordinator, Nathaniel Hackett, and in doing so, then benched quarterback Blake Bortles finally. The Pittsburgh Steelers, who are holding on to the lead in AFC North, lost in a heartbreaker. They committed 4 turnovers, the last one being a weird one where a defensive tackle picked off Ben Roethlisberger near the end zone, almost got blocked into the interception, one of the weirder picks I've seen. The Chicago Bears won on Thanksgiving, a nice little victory for Will, a non-precursor to what ended up happening on Saturday, but more on that later. The Bears won with backup quarterback Chase Daniel. The Patriots continue to win. They're hitting their stride, kind of flying under the radar. The Ravens are now 2-0 under Lamar Jackson, who will start again this coming Week 13. And Houston Texans owner Bob McNair passed away last Friday. The Texans played the Titans on Monday night, winning their 8th straight win. After starting 0-3, it's the first time that's been done in the NFL. And of note, the Texans have a very favorable schedule, which most experts think will wind up providing them 12, maybe even 13 wins when the season's all finished. So the Texans seem to be en route, I'll knock on wood for my family's sake, but en route to at least a playoff berth here. The jury's out on whether they'll be a tough out or because their lack of tough schedule down the stretch will hinder them come January. Overall, I'm a yeah fan to this past week in the NFL. I dig it more so than anything else because of Thanksgiving football. I love getting to watch my Cowboys while being stuffed full with turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, the whole 9 yards. Nothing better than being lazy all day and watching football, gaining 5 pounds and not doing a thing about it. So I'm a yeah fan to this week in the NFL. Of course, 2 of the more high-flying teams, the Rams and Chiefs, are on bye this week, but things are heating up at the right time, and a lot of races are not too far out of reach at this point. And if they are, the wild card will be down to the wire, it seems like, in both conferences. Okay, the bigger thing worth noting, of course, was the week in college football. The first shakeup in the college football playoff rankings happened. Probably the first, at least somewhat tough job for the college football playoff selection committee came in the final regular season week, where they had to make some decisions ranking-wise. Of course, number 1 remains Alabama, and rightfully so. Number 2, Clemson, also rightfully so and undefeated. And number 3 is Notre Dame, who finished the season undefeated after defeating rival USC this past weekend, and likely will have clinched a playoff spot. This week, the committee chose to put Georgia at number 4. This being over Oklahoma and Ohio State. So Oklahoma ended up coming in at number 5 and Ohio State at number 6. Of course, we all know that number 4 Georgia faces number 1 Alabama in the SEC championship game this coming weekend. UCF still climbed up a spot. They are up to number 8, just behind the top 6 we mentioned, and Michigan coming off a loss who dropped to 7. Of bigger note for UCF, they unfortunately lost their starting quarterback to pretty horrific injury in their win versus USF. And then a few other things worth noting in college football. Washington State lost, and with it went any chance the Pac-12 had at making the Final Four. LSU fell in a very high-scoring game, the highest in history, in fact. More on that later. And, of course, we are heading into Conference Championship Week, so we will stay tuned. The jury's still out on who will make it to the playoffs. And what everybody wants to know, yeah, fam or nah, to the college football playoff rankings. I'm a yeah fam right now. I think everything seems to be appropriately ranked. Georgia, for right now, deserves to be a number 4. Alabama faces them this weekend and is favored. Hopefully for Oklahoma and Ohio State fans, Alabama takes care of business with Georgia, because the last thing those fans need is 2 SEC teams making the college football playoff again, and Georgia upsetting Alabama, forcing the committee to likely leave Alabama in. The biggest question that the committee had was between number 5 and number 6. There is quite the debate whether Oklahoma should be at number 5 or Ohio State at number 5. We know Oklahoma's defense is rough. Ohio State's is rough themselves, but Oklahoma's is worse. However, Ohio State has the worst loss. When you lose big to Purdue, it's hard to overcome, especially compared to Oklahoma's 3-point loss to Texas, who they have a chance at avenging in the Big 12 championship. So if you're an Ohio State fan, you're all about that okay, cool, hook 'em, and you're all about Alabama handling business. That's what Buckeye fans need if we want any chance. And Oklahoma fans are just hoping for the Alabama victory and handling business, beating the one team that's beat them this season, and being able to say that they've beat everyone on their schedule, since Texas in the Big 12 championship would be their second meeting. Overall, I'm a yeah fam. I love the result of the Ohio State game. Like I promised, more on that later. But they put themselves in a position to be in the conversation. It still pisses me off about the Purdue loss, just like it doomed them with the Iowa loss last year. They'll have no one to blame but themselves. But for right now, I'm a yeah fam. There's still optimism heading into Conference Championship Week, and I love the shakeup that it gives the College Football Playoff Committee and the decisions they have to make. So fingers crossed to everyone involved, except for those top-heavy teams. Nobody's rooting for you. Sorry. I haven't hid that I'm on Team Petty first and foremost. Okay, and last Yeah Fam or Nah came after NFL Game Sunday. It was all over coverage. Baker Mayfield snubbed former head coach Hue Jackson after the Browns beat the Bengals 35-20. Of course, we know Hue Jackson took a job with the Bengals shortly after being fired as head coach of the Browns. When asked about it, Mayfield said, quote, "I didn't feel like talking. Why? I don't know. Left Cleveland, goes down to Cincinnati. I don't know. It's just somebody that was in our locker room asking for us to play for him, and then goes to a different team we play twice a year. Everybody can have their spin on it, but that's how I feel." First of all, Baker, he got fired. He has a family to worry about. What's he supposed to do? Not feed his family, not go get a job while he can? We all know coaches who get forgotten don't usually get an opportunity. Hue Jackson stayed in the forefront. Of course, he went on this media campaign kind of smearing Baker. I think that's the root of the sourness Baker has. But Hue Jackson stayed relevant and got a job out of it. We can't fault the guy for paying his bills and taking a job that was offered to him. I don't see the point in Baker questioning that part. Baker continued, quote, "We just had to play better. You can put your own spin on it, but we have the same players. We have people that we believe in calling the plays now." End quote. Bury him, Baker, why don't you? Sheesh. A little harsh. You already beat the man. Beat the Bengals. Beat a rival. First time getting back-to-back victories. and you're focused on the guy who left your team, not voluntarily, but got fired and did what he had to do that was best for his family. I don't like the dynamics of this. I'm a nah to Baker Mayfield. Some people feel he's perfectly fine snubbing Hue Jackson and calling him out after Hue went on that media spree following being fired. But just let the man live. Everybody's moving on. You're doing well. You got the win. I've always hated this about Baker. Just too showboaty. It's just extra. You don't need any of that. Don't need to bury the man when he's already in a low place and already got fired. Let the man live and let the man make a living. Okay, let's move on to likey, no likey, hate it. Likey to the Buckeyes winning in such satisfying fashion versus that team up north 62-39. Holy nuts, we couldn't have asked for a better victory here in Columbus. And boy, did those Buckeyes deliver. What a time to play their best game of the season and show up a supposed number one defense. The most points scored in the history of their rivalry, 62 points. Gotta love it. Sorry to the fans of the team up north. That was your chance. I just feel it. And I promised you I was going to be insufferable. And I've actually kept it pretty tame. So, you know what? Go fucking Bucks, man. Another likey goes to the Cowboys winning on Thanksgiving versus Washington. They got a huge game from Amari Cooper to the tune of 8 catches, 180 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Loved every second of it. Felt vindicated. I thought the price was too high, but this is the first time I was like, well, maybe the Cowboys knew what they're doing. Which brings me to my no likey and knowing that the New Orleans Saints are coming up next against the Cowboys with DeMarcus Lawrence already having talked shit, giving the Saints bulletin board material. So no likey to that. I'm glad they got their wins when they could, but the Saints are no pushover, to say the least. I had to get back to it after a brief break, but back to the game. Hate it to the concept of Dwayne Haskins putting himself back in the Heisman contention with the Buckeyes' big win versus Michigan. Why was he removed from contention at all if Oklahoma's Kyler Murray never was? Here's a toasty take alert. Big 12 players, like Kyler Murray, should be exempt from the Heisman with the defenses they face. Oklahoma this past week beat West Virginia 59-56. The Sooners have scored below 48 just twice. Once versus Army, who we all know the military academies run the triple option, in a 28-21 win. The other was versus Iowa State, in which they won 37-27. Oklahoma is the best team in the Big 12, while their defense is giving up over 37 points per game on average in conference play. Hate it to that. Hate it to the concept of Dwayne Haskins having to prove himself while Kyler Murray gets all the hype facing defenses that are JV quality. It's absolutely ridiculous. And yes, it's a toasty take, but until Big 12 defenses get better, the stats seem so empty to me. They're a big lottie frickin' da to me. Dwayne for Heisman. There's no bias involved in that. Just letting you know. Gotta give a hate it to Michigan fans still acting like it was just a game. I know I ranted about this in the last episode. I cannot stress this enough. Y'all sound like the losers you are saying stuff like that. Trying to downplay a rivalry after you lose repeatedly is the ultimate punk move. Maybe you ought to take it serious like we do, and maybe you'll get some victories out of it. I don't know. Maybe it'll work. But acting all high and mighty after the game after you lose is quite the tactic to take. It's quite the bitch tactic to take, I tell you. And on that note, I want to send a hate it to fans who claim that those of us who didn't pick, for example, Ohio State to beat Michigan can't be part of celebrating future victories. Fuck out of here and fuck off your high horse. We're allowed to pick against our team. We're allowed to be pessimists. Who are you to tell me how to be a fan? I don't always have to support everything that's done. I don't always have to feel good about the impending game coming up. I'm not going to be delusional. Do you look at fans of shit teams the same way and expect them to have their team win? Do we expect Kansas Jayhawk fans to expect to beat Oklahoma every year in Big 12 play just because they're fans? Get the fuck out of here. Fuck you if you are one of those people that expects people to always be positive about their team. It's called being a fan for a reason. We're allowed to be irrational one way or another. Who are you to be the fan police of how to properly do things? In fact, if I'm the fan police, which I'm the pettiest of fan police, I think you ought to be more like us. Stop being positive all the time. Why do you need to be? It's called being a fan. Be irrational with us. Who gives a fuck? I'm over here thinking we were going to lose and then now acting like I knew we had it in us. Join me in being irrational and petty. Why won't you? All right, listeners of the number one podcast in your headphones. This brings us to You Played Yourself, my personal new favorite category that features results you didn't expect to happen. Basically, a category to call out things that shouldn't have happened. In a perfect segue, running back Michigan, Higdon, guaranteed Michigan would win. You played yourself. That's all I need to say. You played yourself. Didn't sniff the end zone. Got shut down. Had a few big hits made against you. And most of all, your team lost 62-39. A bonus, you played yourself. Michigan's top, air quote, top defense, giving up 62 points, the most ever in the history of the Ohio State and Michigan rivalry. You played yourself, especially you, Chase Winovich. Okay, we all saw this one. I know it was a rough way to go down, but you played yourself, LSU, in giving your coach Ed Orgeron a Gatorade bath, and then ended up losing. Nothing's more embarrassing. LSU looked like they had the game-clinching interception, but then it was overturned because the Texas A&M quarterback's knee hit the turf collecting a bad snap. And then on top of that, LSU had a controversial spot of the ball giving A&M a first down on a 4th and 18 conversion. The refs then proceeded to add 1 second on the clock, which led to the Aggies getting a touchdown and forcing overtime. And we all know by now that game went to 7 overtimes, which ties a record, and resulted in Texas A&M winning 74-72. You heard that correctly. This is not basketball, the highest scoring game in history. And we can't go too far without giving a bonus. You played yourself to the referees of that game. Definitely sketchy circumstances surrounding how LSU lost. So yeah, you played yourself, referees, SEC referees of that LSU versus Texas A&M game. One of my favorite people to pick on because of his bratty attitude and sore loserness, Jalen Ramsey. Jalen Ramsey, you played yourself in general and specifically in August during an interview with GQ. Regarding Bills quarterback Josh Allen, said, quote, "He's trash and it's going to show. That's a stupid draft pick to me. We play them this year and I'm excited as hell. I hope he's their starting quarterback," end quote. What did Josh Allen proceed to do against the Jaguars? Get 259 total yards, 2 touchdowns, and led his Buffalo Bills to a 24-21 victory over Ramsey's Jaguars. You played yourself, Jalen Ramsey. Staying in that game, I had to give a you played yourself to Leonard Fournette and running back of the Jags and linebacker of the Bills, Shaq Lawson. There was a brawl towards the end of the Jags and Bills game. It led to a 1-game suspension for Fournette. You played yourself fighting like that and being stupid. Fournette especially is so important to their team, and fantasy owners have to be pissed heading down the stretch and heading towards playoffs. Another bonus you played yourself to the people responsible for escorting the ejected Lawson and Fournette out at the same time. The two had to be separated in the tunnel. Bottom line, this game is lucky the brawl didn't lead to fans getting hurt because that brawl was so close to the stands. It is amazing that no one got hurt, and thankfully no one did. You played yourself, Fournette, Shaq Lawson, and especially those people that escorted them out at the same time. And last but not least, a you played yourself goes to the Tiger versus Phil matchup on Bleacher Report Live. A glitch led to people getting to watch for free. This is a pay-per-view event. And technical difficulties led to customers having to get their money back. The two golfers didn't look great. They didn't talk much like people expected to have some kind of banter. It went to extra holes where Phil defeated Tiger. But it was just subpar quality golf. Good for Phil getting a $9 million bag, but hopefully if they do this again, it's a little bit better planned. You played yourself, Tiger versus Phil. Okay, should they be worried? Figured the appropriate team to lead off, should they be worried, was the Los Angeles Chargers. They are one game back of the Kansas City Chiefs, who are coming off a bye, but they lose Melvin Gordon to what appears to be MCL sprain. Will likely lead to him being sat out a few weeks after he just got back. Should they be worried? The Chargers, I say right now, no. They still seem to be in a driver's seat for one of the wild card spots. It seems like the division might get out of reach without their star player in Melvin Gordon, who's having a terrific season. But in the grand scheme, they should not be worried. Coming off a big game, their defense is getting healthy. Joey Bosa is back. So I don't think there's room to be worried yet. And should they be worried? Ohio State and Oklahoma, specifically if Alabama loses in the SEC championship, would the College Football Playoff Committee leave out Bama if they lost to Georgia this weekend? Or would the SEC get two teams in like last year? Of course, last year was a little different because Alabama wasn't playing this weekend, but they still got into the playoff. Ohio State and Oklahoma fans should absolutely be worried in general. If Georgia does pull the upset, especially in that scenario, I do not believe the committee leaves out Alabama and penalizes them for losing late to a number 4 ranked Georgia. Ohio State and Oklahoma are both in trouble, and likely one of them should be worried no matter what. The ideal scenario for the Buckeyes is Alabama handles business and Texas wins for a second time against Oklahoma. Not likely because it's tough to beat an opponent twice, but if you're a Buckeye fan, you're okay, cool, hook 'em, and unfortunately rooting for Alabama. If you are an Oklahoma Sooners fan, you likely get in if every team that handles business does. You would then become the number 4 team if all continues to go to plan. To solidify that shot, probably rooting for Northwestern, and again, Alabama handling business. So absolutely they should be worried. If Alabama were to lose, I think Oklahoma and Ohio State fans are both on the outside looking in, unfortunately. Okay, we're on to who you got and what you feeling. My chance to make a few game picks and recap past ones. There was an early episode where we went over the new college football hires, and I thought as the regular season is now wrapped up in college football, it's a good time to kind of recap how each of the new coaches did in their new situations. Of course, we had Chip Kelly go to UCLA. The Bruins ended up finishing 3-9 and 3-6 in the Pac-12. Dan Mullen fared one of the better of this group. He's, of course, the head coach of Florida. They finished 9-3 and 5-3 in their conference with a number 9 ranking in the latest college football playoff rankings. Herm Edwards, former ESPN employee and former NFL coach, went to Arizona State. The Sun Devils finished 7-5 and 5-4 in conference. A few other names worth noting. Scott Frost, after that abysmal start at Nebraska, ended up leading the Cornhuskers to a 4-8 record, 3-6 in the Big Ten. Jeremy Pruitt, former defensive coordinator from Alabama, went to Tennessee. The Vols finished 5-7 and just 2-6 in the SEC. Jimbo Fisher went from Florida State to Texas A&M. We talked about their final game of the regular season, the 74-72 overtime game. They ended up finishing second in the SEC West over LSU at 8-4 and 5-3 in the conference. Willie Taggart, after 1 year at Oregon, went to Florida State. The Seminoles finished 5-7 and 3-5 in the ACC. And way back in this episode, Akshat and I talked about which moves we liked the most, which ones we hated, and which one would surprise. I stated that I liked the Dan Mullen move in Florida. Of course, we recapped. They are number 9 in the college football playoff ranking, so that panned out. Akshat picked Scott Frost, which was a popular pick, and the jury remains out on him. It seems like the Huskers were heading in the right direction towards the end of the season after a rough start. Akshat and I both hated the Willie Taggart move. Taggart, after 1 year, kind of deserted his players at Oregon and all the progress he made and chose to go to Florida State. Didn't really like the move, and the Seminoles struggled this year. As for our moves that surprise, Akshat went with Chip Kelly. Of course, Chip Kelly still has recruits to get in for his big-time spread offense. They struggled this year, as we recapped. I really like the Herm Edwards look at Arizona State, and they fared pretty well. However, don't let the record deceive you. Herm Edwards and the Sun Devils finished 7-5 and 5-4 in conference, but their previous coach, Todd Graham, got fired for the exact same record. So it's difficult in the first year to go 7-5. The expectations are only going to rise, and we'll see if Herm is able to get to 8 or 9 wins, because that would be the desired and new standard at Arizona State. The Sun Devils did finish second in the Pac-12 South, but we all know about the Pac-12 is pretty weak, especially in the South. And the team that finished ahead of them, Utah, was the only other team in the Pac-12 South with a winning record. So could be a little deceptive, but record-wise seemed to fare pretty well. And that brings us to a few updated moves in college football. Now that the regular season ended, there were some coaching moves made rather swiftly. Texas Tech fired Cliff Kingsbury, an alum of Texas Tech, after another disappointing season. North Carolina fired Larry Fedora, who is 45-43 in 7 seasons, and looks to be hiring Mac Brown for that position, former Texas coach. Western Kentucky fired Mike Sanford after just 2 seasons. And after Louisville fired Bobby Petrino a long time ago, it is setting up for Purdue's Jeff Brom to be up next. It is still uncertain whether that will happen for sure, but that is his alma mater, and most people think that move will happen for Jeff Brom to move from Purdue to Louisville. And the other big hire was the Kansas Jayhawks hiring Les Miles as their head coach. A big name goes to KU, and for some reason, the Fighting Illini extended Lovie Smith after a 4-8 season. This might be a candidate for you played yourself, but figured those moves were worth highlighting. A bonus pick that Will and I made last week was which NFL team's irregular record is more surprising. The candidates were the Eagles at 4-6 last week and 3rd in the NFC East. Of course, they won last week against the Giants. The Jaguars, who were 3-7 last week, lost again. They are last in the AFC South. The Bears, who are now 8-3 and still first in the NFC North. The Chiefs at 9-2 and first in the AFC West. Will chose to go the negative route and focus on the Jags being the most surprising. Definitely did not see them losing to the Bills, adding to their loss total. I was very surprised at the Bears and them being atop the NFC North, especially with the talent in their division. Never would have guessed that would happen. Of course, it was rivalry week. Will and I discussed what the second best rivalry in all of sports were. Remember, don't ever get it twisted and think there's any rivalry better than Ohio State, Michigan. Of course, candidates were Yankees, Red Sox, Duke, UNC. Will brought up his choice of Bears, Packers. And I said it was a trick question. There's no second best rivalry. I don't believe in that, so we can count that as a correct for me. We made our picks for favorite moment in the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry. Will did not have one during his life, and that was plenty satisfying of an answer for me, and didn't take it any further. And we picked the game. That team up north, Michigan, came to Columbus and played Ohio State, and were favorites, road favorites heading into the game with their number one defense. Will went with Michigan pulling it out especially because Don Brown didn't have to face a mobile quarterback like he did with JT Barrett. Although my head said Michigan, went with my heart and Ohio State, expecting the worst and hoping for the best, and I definitely got the best I could hope for. The Buckeyes won 62-39. Nothing makes me more joyous to say that I was right, and I was glad I went with my heart. And that brings us to this week's picks. Of course, I usually pick an NFL game, and this week went with the Los Angeles Chargers, who we talked about earlier, visiting Pittsburgh, and the 7-3-1 Steelers. The Chargers will be without Melvin Gordon. Like I said earlier, are one game back of Kansas City. The Steelers have about a game and a half lead on the Ravens. Before I make my pick, I had to give a shout out the opposite of Lottie freaking da. Phillip Rivers' game against the Cardinals, he completed a record 25 straight passes and finished with the best passing percentage in NFL history, 96.55%. He was 28 of 29 passing, so shout out to that game. No, we don't accentuate the good enough, but that definitely is. That being said, I think after the disappointing loss the Steelers faced in Denver, I think they come back and pull out a victory against the very, very stout defense of the Chargers. I think the Chargers will miss Melvin Gordon, although they have Austin Eckler to back him up. I think the Steelers come out victorious, especially as a home team. So, going with the 7-3-1 Steelers topping the 8-3 Chargers. And I wanted to be bold and pick all the conference championship games in college football that are coming up this weekend. Of course, we have the SEC championship game, number 1 Alabama versus number 4 Georgia. Alabama is favored by a whopping 13 points. Worth noting, Georgia does have one loss. It was to LSU earlier in the season. They lost 36-16. No surprise here. I'm going with Bama. I don't know if it'll be big, but feel comfortable picking them and hope that they do win. That might be the only time you ever hear that. ACC championship game is number 2 Clemson. Number 2 Clemson versus now unranked Pitt. This one is pointless. Clemson is 26-point favorites. I wish they could get penalized for having such a weak conference, but they won't. They'll finish undefeated, so Clemson big. The Big 12 championship game features number 5 Oklahoma versus number 14 Texas. The previous meeting was October 6th in Dallas, Texas, in which Texas won 48-45 with a field goal as time expired. This time, Oklahoma is favored by 7.5. My head tells me Oklahoma's going to win this game handedly. It's really difficult to beat a team twice, but I just have to go with my heart and hope for the best and say, okay, cool, hook 'em, and hope our former coordinator, Tom Hermie-Cakes, handles business. And that brings me to the Big Ten championship game. Number 6 Ohio State plays number 21 Northwestern in Indianapolis for the Big Ten title. Northwestern clinched the Big Ten West 3 weeks ago. They have 4 losses, 3 of which were out of conference: Duke, Akron, and Notre Dame. And their one conference loss was to Michigan, in which it was a game in which they were up by 17 points, ended up losing 20-17. Ohio State is favored by 2 touchdowns, and I will go with Ohio State, and I hope for Buckeye fans' sake it is a big victory. Again, hoping for the best, expecting the worst, but hopefully they win the Big Ten and we'll go from there as Buckeye fans. All right, so the only conference championship I didn't pick was the only one that wasn't relevant, which is the Pac-12. But my picks for the other ones are pretty standard across the board for most. SEC, Bama over Georgia. The ACC, Clemson, big over Pitt. The Big Ten championship, going with Ohio State over Northwestern. And going with my heart in the Big 12 championship in Texas, be upsetting Oklahoma, but won't be surprised if my head telling me Oklahoma ends up being correct. As for what I'm feeling this week, that whole Thanksgiving weekend, extended weekend. First, we had Thanksgiving at a friend's house. Shout out Zach and Tori. Got to watch the Cowboys win. Got to see Creed 2 with the amazing soundtrack, amazing fighting scenes, classic to the Rocky series. Then got to see old friends. And finally, got to see the Buckeyes beat down that team up north with friends who surprised me from out of town. Shout out to them, Hillary and Anthony. It was a weekend full of love and happy results in the sports world. Couldn't ask for more. Hopefully it continues this year, but definitely feeling that Thanksgiving extended weekend. You know how I like to end every podcast episode. It's my 2 much sense. I love giving advice. It's usually more than 2 cents worth. So this is my chance to educate the people. If you're too scared to tell your loved ones something you're up to, the loved ones that have your back no matter what, you're probably in the wrong if you're not telling them. Stop hiding shit. If you feel the need to hide something, just know that it'll come to light, and it'll be worse off than it was. If you can't trust the people around you with what you're doing, you're probably definitely not even close to doing the right thing. Most of those loved ones have your back no matter what, but if you're keeping it from them, that's when it's an issue. And that's my 2 much sense, is to trust those around you and don't hide things from them. And that'll do it for another edition of the number one podcast in your headphones. As always, appreciate the listens. Appreciate sharing it with someone who hasn't listened. Please subscribe. Please check out the other Holyfield podcasts and the other amazing pieces from Holyfield. And we'll talk to you on the next episode.